Okay, hello everyone and welcome to another episode. The title for today is Are We Invisibly Being Visible? I feel this is a fair question to ask. In the subtitle I've written The Invisible Doer. And I find it interesting that we consider ourselves as real people right now, but the idea that is moving the reality is not real. You see, a person can imagine, like right now in front of me, I'm seeing a coffee cup. Now I can imagine a coffee cup. I can imagine another coffee cup, the same coffee cup right beside the coffee cup I'm seeing. Now that imagined coffee cup is not the coffee cup, is not real. It's real to the inner experiencer, but it is not real to the outer existence. So we are, in a sense, something that is invisible to the outer realm, but visible to the inner realm, is moving the outer realms. Now, what's even more interesting is that when I say the word the invisible doer, that's suggesting an invisible identity. That means there is still something being identified with, and we can only identify with the visible. To identify with the invisible is like you identified with nothing. It's like two dimensions of reality. One of them is controlling both of them, but we don't realize it. In this moment, I'm seated, and my outer realms is stationary. It's where it is, like all the stuff I'm looking at, the computer screen, the keyboard, this pen in my hand, this notebook. This is all in my outer realms. Now, if I was to close my eyes and wonder who is watching this visibility, who is noticing this, it's as if we're trying to have a similar relationship we have with the visible, with the invisible. We are trying to identify with content. I mean, that's really what the human being is. We're a moment of being. This moment of being, it's like your senses. It's like our brains are like a candle in a dark room. The candle illuminates everything around it. So our senses that constitute the world are like how our brain's afterglow. Intelligence is like an afterglow, or sensory existence is the afterglow of whatever the brain is doing. In regards to the visible dimension, none of these objects will move. But if I was to think of a coffee cup, my attention to that content in the inner realm will change. That means it's like telling someone for the whole day to think about a coffee cup, right? You'll see it's not possible in a sense. It is possible, but I'm saying it's not possible. It would be possible if you were in a room that was only there was only a coffee cup. But I'm saying if the inner realm changes and we are identifying with a subjective sense of self, we are literally being a self that is changing quicker than the body. We think the self moves the body. right? But I will tell you, it's the changing of selves that moves the body. It's like going from self to self, that in the middle of it, there's the invisible watcher claims an identity of it. There's this story of a patriarch of Buddhism by the name of Bodhidharma. This dude's in samadhi, and his samadhi was kind of strange. He was like, his face was inches away from the wall of this palace, and pretty much Bodhidharma scolds this king, and he goes into samadhi outside of the palace, like his face inches away from the wall, because he doesn't want to get distracted by Maya, distracted by the material realm. Somebody comes up to Bodhidharma after a long time, and the person's like, Bodhidharma, help me. Bodhidharma is dismissive. He's not even in individual consciousness to acknowledge the guy. The guy does something intense, and he cuts his own hand. This is like a weird, this is actually like the story actually happened, but I don't know why the guy did that. In the story it said, in the Zen story it said it was a sign of loyalty, but I don't know how. So the guy anyways does something extreme. He cuts his hand. He looks at Bodhidharma, and he's like, you have to help me. Something messed up, right? But Bodhidharma eventually grants the guy an audience, and he's like, what's wrong? What's the problem? And the guy says, Bodhidharma, help me. Please pacify my mind. My mind is restless. The guy couldn't sleep. The guy had inner turbulence to a degree that he couldn't even function as a human being. That could be the case. Emotions can get so heavy that they dehumanize us. Right? That means if somebody is just shown cruelty over, they have to be a really strong-willed being, or they will get reconditioned. The guy says, please pacify my mind. Bodhidharma says, okay, this enlightened patriarch of Buddhism. He says, okay, bring this mind that's causing you suffering, all your problems in this life, bring this mind in front of me right now, and I'll pacify it for you. And the guy starts freaking out. The guy starts freaking out because he's never thought his mind is an object. Like the guy, he's had a problem of the mind. He knows the word mind. But when asked, bring your mind in front of me, this guy couldn't find his mind. And he gets shocked, and he looks at Bodhidharma, and he says, I can't find it. And Bodhidharma shouts at him as if his soul is roaring, and he says, there, your soul is pacified. Excuse me, your mind is pacified. What he means is, some problems we can suffer from, but they don't exist, or they exist as points of subjective attention that are in disguise of reality to the inner realm. It's fair to say that people, like when a human being enters this world, it's not like, regardless of how many people act saintly, eventually lies will be noticed. That's part of human living. Imagine a person who suddenly realizes the world has lied to it. Its parents, its family, its culture, its society, the knowledge of its species, all of it was like lie, 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 lie. Then the person has to think, okay, if people lie to me, could it be that I have lied to myself as a person in a certain moment in the space-time continuum? That means, let's say you're a person, you mess up something, and you suddenly shout, I mess up things, why? Universe, why do I mess up? And years past that moment, and because the person created an inner event where they made that image, that possibility real, that they could be moments where the person goes and he doesn't fail for so many years, then suddenly after 10 years he fails or something. And then all of that emotion, the inner event could linger, could come back, right? Our minds are not objects. You see, one of the coolest moments in life is when a person realizes the lies they have told themselves. You know, I was mentioning this last night to someone in the Discord server. It's like, imagine there's a kid, you know, and this kid at a young age does something. The kid's just being happy, and then somebody comes and says, "You're such a good boy," you know, and this kid's like, "Oh my God, am I?" You know, and this young kid accepts he's a good boy, like as if doing nothing, and somebody telling him, "You're good for doing nothing," you know, and this person accepts nothing is good, imagine, as if he's good without doing anything. You know, this is the concept where in the future you gotta earn your morality. That kid is gonna grow up and do something and think it's good. Think the kid's gonna think it's being a good boy, and then suddenly see there is nothing good about it. That's an example of a lie. That's an example of a bit of language possessing the person's significance, right? If, for example, if the person A and person B are in the park, person B comes to person A and says, "Person A, how dare you be the first letter of the alphabet? You know, you're the last letter of the alphabet when I asked Z." Person Z told me you're the last person of the alphabet. You know, how dare, you know. And person A can choose to believe. Person A can choose to, let's say instead of person B, it was person Z. Person Z came to person A and said, "You're the last letter of the alphabet, man. I'm the first letter. Are you kidding me? You know, look at my straight line." And the interesting thing about the letter, I would say, A and Z, is that both of them take 3 lines to draw. So the first letter of the alphabet and the last letter of the alphabet, they're just 3 lines each. But the idea is that the language occupied how the person existed to themselves. Yeah. Now, when Bodhidharma was like, "Bring your mind in front of me to that guy," and that guy couldn't bring his mind, it's like me saying right now, "Hey, right, what is moving the visible?" You see, we have evidence of the wind moving the leaf. We have evidence of something that we can't see moving something we see, right? And if the unseen is denied right off the bat, there never was the curiosity in the first place. You know, this is why I'm telling you, I personally feel there's a war going on. But I'm saying this playfully just to raise interest in philosophy. Between continental philosophers and analytical philosophers. It's as if analytical philosophers were lazy. Incredibly lazy. And what I mean by this is that they pushed aside the mystery too quick. It's like, really? 250,000 years on a universe that's been here so long, right? And we think we figured it out, and we think all our knowledge is top notch, and we know how to measure things exactly. You know, it's like the biggest question. Many moments have pilots, I would say. There's the Zen story, 2 imperial swordsmen. 2 imperial guards, palace guards. These palace guards are bored. They're like, man, every day we're standing here. Is this why we incarnated as beings, to just stand here? You know, and these palace guards you get bored, and one of them looks at the other one. It's like, hey man, you see that flag? And there was a flagpole in front of them. And one of them says, hey, you see that flag? It's the wind that's moving. It's the wind moving the flag. And then somebody looks at the flag and says, no man, but the flag is moving. So these two palace guards start debating, yo, is the flag moving or is the wind moving? To their surprise, a Zen master was walking nearby. They go up to the Zen master and they say, kind sir, advise us now, which is moving, the flag or the wind? And the Zen master smiles, or the sage or whatever, and he smiles and he says, the mind is moving. That means if we want to play blame games with movement, it has to be reverse engineering to its causal source. This is why so many people in mystical practices, they feel their God. They meditate a little bit, notice inseparability, and they feel their God, they feel everything is God. You see, to study the invisible means completely different methodology than the visible. It could even be methodless. It could be that the only way we can understand and comprehend space is by being it. You know, imagine in the future there comes a human being, and this human being's ambition is not to become a person in society, a face in history. This person's ambition is to become space. And that's like one of the most next level noble things a multidimensional being can do. For a human being, it's weird. It's like, hey man, stay human. Why do you want to become space? But to a multidimensional being, space is an achievement. It's literally us planting the flag on the moon when we can comprehend our own being unconditional to our body's limits. That's the thing. If the mind is independent of the body, as René Descartes in his mind-body dualism was suggesting, if it's independent, if it's like its own dimension, the mind, then it's not limited to the body. The body is limited to the mind. That means if we are not material, a completely different spectrum of possibilities arise. For me, it is force. That means I sit here and I use these words to communicate to audiences, but deep down I know that the way to pilot beyond the sensory has nothing to do with how the sensory is analyzed. That means the sensory perception, it's just like paint. It's all about what you draw with it, because it can never be a complete reception, as if the brain is not a big enough container to contain the universe, but the universe seems to be containing the brain, right? And so the brain, if logically it doesn't have that much power, let's say electromagnetic generative ability, something that is not an object is being the whole moment, is being the here and now. And we come to wonder about this, but be limited to our definitions. That means how many questions, just like inventions that haven't been made yet, how many great questions, genius questions, are residing in our world? How many parts of our systems of life that we have built or exist that we haven't looked at, right? That's the thing. We think we know, but we only know that we don't know. That is the thing we can be certain of. Because knowledge, if it's multidimensional, is not enough. That means if you need to ask 5 people for information and then make a decision, it's like asking one person and making a decision is not enough. You know, the species might in the future have to retire the concept of truth to anything that is not a concept. You see, who said language can contain truth? That's the biggest challenge of our species, to wake up from the fact that whatever system or method we use does not justify the totality of our being. You know, just because we see a few things, it doesn't mean we know the whole thing. The best chance, the best shot of, let's say you were a person and you're like, hey man, how do I get to know the universe while I'm here? Not just how do I get to know myself, how do I get to know others, how do I get to know nature? How do I get to know the universe? This whole totality of this simulation. Engagement with the living unknown. This is the highest peak of wisdom. This is the evolution of knowledge. That means if the educational system was given homework, its homework would be to wonder what the unknown is. The whole educational system, the global effort, let us say, of human beings to process the realm. You know, ideological truth is like the person is in a burning house and they want to get rid of the flames. They want to find that one idea that puts out all the flames. But mysticism is like the person realizing there's a flame, getting a bucket of water and actually pouring the bucket of water on the flames and realizing that the flames are not there. That means it's as if language makes us feel we're in a burning house, but the planet, but we are not. The house is not burning at all. Do you know? That means it's like, just like human suffering is self-made, just like Epictetus says, we suffer not from the events inside our lives, but from the judgments we have about them. It's as if the judgment we have about life is living first. And once that judgment comes to a completion, right, then the person lives non-ideologically. That means if somebody came and let's say all the people on the planet could listen, and the person's like, anybody who can live non-ideologically, raise your hand. I would instantly raise my hand. Because language is 1/4 of the totality of experiential possibility in this room. That means it's as if we're using 1/4 of a room to guess what the whole room is. And it's as if, like, imagine the battle between truths and the belief wars and whatnot. How belief systems have tried to devour each other. It's as if human species, a belief, here's the thing, all of human knowledge is 1/4 of the room that's lit up. Okay, it's as if we've lit up 1/4 of the room. Now, what is the strategy? The strategy is to treat every human being as a multidimensional light bulb. And when the light of the species increases, when the voltage of curiosity for what is actually going on increases, by impulse, I'm trying to avoid leveling things, really. Because the moment you level something, you make something into a hierarchy, then you trap the character in the story, right? That means if the story is short, the person goes from A to B to C to D and it ends. Or let's say there's 4 phases to the story: phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. Now, if the story had endless phases, there would be no completion. As if when it comes to karma, unless the person chooses to get off the bicycle, get off duality, it's as if there is no stopping of what can happen here. It's as if like an unknown mind endlessly simulating itself, right? What do? An unknown phenomena is endlessly simulating itself in known ways, right? So it's as if it's like we're here thinking about like, oh man, look at people with their obsessions, but guess what? It's like from the metaphysical standpoint, the soul has an obsession for ignorance, for illusion, it seems. All of these will inevitably go to the presence of the person, and that is the invisible doer. The presence, every being has a presence. Their presence is not their personality. But what their personality is able to do is because of their presence. And I say their presence, but this presence is nature. That means it's as if every person who's trying to fit into the cultural program, it's like simultaneously the cultural program is in nature. You know, it's like love is a higher dimensional, in quotations, higher dimensional emotion, right? And those who find themselves experiencing the whole moment as their presence, you not only can no longer judge your own personality, you cannot judge the content of the moment when you notice all of it. That means when I say I'm a physical human being, that's not the whole moment of awareness. That's one part. You know, that's one component. If I say I'm a materialist, well, that's one part of what's going on in matter. There's also space. If I say I'm just a space being, I'm just being space right now, that's again one part of the moment. The whole moment is inseparable. That means once you find a state of mind that cannot be divided, there is no mind anymore. The species will have way more fun if we entertain somehow selflessly the multidimensional. Because I know, like, if this attention is just the body, the moment the body breaks, there is no self. Just think about it. The way nature is designed, just think about this. With the way that nature is designed, you don't have a self when you're born. And it could be the case that when we transition out of this material plane, we are not a self. So the piloting has nothing to do with ideology. It has nothing to do with bodyhood. Okay? So if we are going to enter a state at some point in this realm where we're not going to be able to be dependent on the elemental constitution, and we don't know what's going to happen to the ideological constitution. We don't know if we're going to watch ourselves die or we're going to just vanish. Right? So conceptually, as consciousness, because if consciousness was in the room, if like in Vedic thought, they treat awareness in the mind like space, and space was here before matter. So if space was here before matter, only the body can die to the mind. The mind can never die to the body. The body can die to the mind, though. And it's okay. That's nature. And it's weird, and I don't know why we have immortal temptations when we're designed this way. Like, it's like the biggest shock factor. How could human beings fear death? Like, what in nature went wrong that some natural event could doubt itself, you know? So it's language. Language is the alien in the room. Language is the alien programming in our minds. And you can watch it. That's the biggest clue. That's why I'm telling you, my whole life oscillating between inner realm direct experience and outer realm multiplicity of ideology. I will tell you, it's life. And that word cannot be worded. Like the true essence of that is not, it's like after some point the person realizes, wait a minute, if something in this world changes, how do I know something is changing? Think about it. If we were changing with everything, we wouldn't know we're changing, right? But there is something remaining while everything changes, right? And this is in regards to the memory, which is the brain. It's like the brain is like the weirdest things, the weirdest way atoms evolved. Like who knew atomic activity would become a brain one day? And who knew the brain would become a character in a story one day? And who knew the story would remember where it all came from again, you know? The advanced communicators of the future generations and the many pilots that will land, they will not have the problems of the past, which means the most important thing to be relayed in the future is any technology that creates more opportunity, right, than takes opportunity. I would say if we were to classify all the systems going on in civilization right now, they are taking and giving systems. All systems can be seen through that way, even people, right? It's as if something you test. I personally test this with any person I want to be close with, right? And it's something that honestly, it's my values from my youth kind of echoing, but it's like you gotta see who is a giver by nature. Those people who give, they are free. There is something in their psychology that is not attached. But those people who take and are okay taking, and the energy is not balanced in the moment, then the psychology becomes different. It's like the true colors of the human being come out, you know? There was this quote, I don't know who said it, but it was like this quote that said, at the time of joy, thousands gather around, but when there's sorrow, nobody can be found. I don't know, like something like that, right? Or Charles Bukowski, where those people who are fans of Charles Bukowski, he says like, oh, it's like when you get into trouble, that's when you see who your real friends are. When you're actually, it's inconvenient to be helped, and suddenly someone helps, that's the real, that's a soul that has seen the other soul, right? But souls that are just engaging on a personality level, they don't care. This is the truth. For example, I'm a person I have a twin brother. And growing up, we were in like the same class, same grade, everything when we were young was together. But I would know, and we were told the two different types of human beings and personalities. But there was something that when an emergency would occur, it's as if like sibling mode would turn on. Like your phone, you have like airplane mode and you take your phone out of airplane mode suddenly, it was as if suddenly like there's something about when you care for the life force of a living being. That is where I would say that is the start of care. That's when you start being a human being, when you care to see humanity advance. So many people care about improving their own lives, but what about the life of your species? Huh? When is the species going to update? When? And the answer is when we are ready. It's like as the saying goes, when the student is ready, the master appears. When the human beings of the civilization are advanced enough, the advanced civilization appears. It arises as if it has been built eons ago, and now the memory is just walking away. So, we have this notion that civilizations rise and fall. Let me tell you, civilizations all have risen. And they have all fallen, and it's like two sides of a coin. And believe it or not, the universal being has to choose. So think of it as a human being, you're choosing what kind of clothing to wear. As a universal being, you would choose the laws of your existence. But it wouldn't be ideological choice. It would be multiplicity beyond unfathomable individual mind to it. We are in the individual phase of living right now, right? We haven't reached that collectivity, that presence automata, let's call it, like an ultimatum of evolution, right? That ultimatum is going to be two options. Either we're going to keep updating into something cooler biologically, either our biological evolution is going to become technological or in some other domain. We're going to move beyond human. At some point, the human idea we will become like one presence. Imagine a collective mind, as if everybody's head in the future connect to the same program or computer or whatever. So eventually we are moving beyond individualism, right? So now is a time where people can choose to be selfless, but I would say enjoy your individual consciousness and try to use your ego efficiently, like an Iron Man suit you're in, which is like once in a lifetime, as if Tony Stark was like, hey, you're a cool kid, here, have the Iron Man suit for the weekend, and the person's like, no way, are you serious, And imagine the person uses the Iron Man suit to build themselves another Iron Man suit, because their technology is so advanced, Tony Stark's, lent the Iron Man suit, so that means Jarvis is accessible. So if you had the Iron Man suit for a week, you just step out of the Iron Man suit and you're like, build yourself. And the Iron Man suit would just start finding everything and building another one. This is kind of like the inventor's fantasy, to build an invention, like the ultimate invention, and the ultimate invention is an invention that builds endless inventions. And energy is that. And the presence is unknown. That means anybody who's uncomfortable with the unknown, it's as if like, don't put the sticker of spirituality on your forehead. It doesn't serve. It has to be living. Any sort of advancement when it comes to truth, because we're living, we're like, okay, it can't be less than our being. Anyways. So, how do we use individual consciousness like an Iron Man suit for a collective space? We're like a remote existence. Yeah. And look at the nature of this world. Like, anything you zoom into based on the eyes becomes a world. Based on the range of sight becomes a world. Anything you zoom out of is transcendence. So transcendence is, believe it or not, zooming out of what you had zoomed in, you know? Back in the day, you can say to be a man, you had to know how to use a sword. And even if you were, it didn't matter if you were a man, if you were a woman, you had to know how to use a sword, generally. You had to know defense and offense. In this modern time, we don't have swords and shields. But we have the pen, the paper, and we have insight. We have our minds. So if people's minds, if every person's mind could be translated to a weapon, to a different sized sword, imagine, right? Imagine every person's mind suddenly out of the sky there came this light and a unique sword and shield came. As if every person has a unique sword and shield. And to make it even more interesting, let's say a sword, a shield, and a book. These are the, let's say, 3 gifts. And for everybody, what these gifts appear are different. For some people, who, let's say they are shy, for them their sword is small, but their shield's bigger, and maybe they have a bigger book. You know, for those people, some people may just have the sword and they might not even need a shield. They have only the sword and the book. Do you know what I mean? Someone may just have the shield. You know, a person who fears, their whole life's game becomes just shielding themselves from everything. You know, that means it's as if after some point the person's like, okay, fear, you wanna stay, okay, stay, but I'm gonna still live. You know, like, you know, so regardless of the idea, the person's something, the mover within goes forth. And people had different kind of, you can say, qualities, right? Like some people, they were comfortable fighting with a heavier sword. Like when you even see, for example, the samurai and the ninja, like the samurai was like taking the tank strategy, like armoring itself up and having just like a you know, heavy sword. But the ninja was like mobile. The ninja didn't have armor, didn't have shield, but was like camouflage was its shield, and it threw stuff at the samurai from long distance. So to wield our intelligence, and for every human being to discover what their gift is. That means a gift is something given. DNA is given. You know, conditioning and all of this is given. Whatever happens to you as a human being or has happened to you so far is what nature has given your intelligence. Now, to use what you have means you have to trust. Like, it doesn't matter if you have a sword and shield. If you don't trust the sword in your hand, you can't use it. If you don't trust the shield in your hand, you can't use it. And check this out. Even if you know how to use something, in battle, there's no telling what the outcome's going to be. Right? A person can have whatever analysis, right? A soccer player could think, I'm going to go in the field, dribble everybody, score, everybody's going to cheer, yeah. And then the person suddenly goes and sees the system doesn't even, you can't just use your own sword and shield. So it then becomes a collective strategy, right? Think of it this way, it becomes like group game theory. There was a moment, a couple times actually, a moment like this, where, how would I say it? Imagine your attention going on the inner realms. Imagine you seeing in the future of your own self. Imagine seeing past your non-existence. Imagine, like, in a strange way, like Scrooge, Ebenezer Scrooge from Christmas, seeing the ghost of the future. And then imagine, after seeing the ghost of the future, then speaking to the logos. And the only response being, when you can't do anything, be. If you can't be anything, do. And imagine there was this argument where the species was like, why should we throw away our individual desires and help build a collective system? Why? Everybody's gonna die. 99.9% of species go extinct. What's the point? And imagine the way we try, the argument would be, if you don't want to get rid of your desire, that's fine. But at least desire the advance. That means if you can't get rid of your desires, that's fine. But desire the high quality. Because this moment, like all our moments, is our life. And it echoes. That means it's like the movie Gladiator, what Maximus was saying. What we do in real life echoes in eternity. But it doesn't echo in an eternity that we may be here for. As if we lived for meaning, for a meaningful world, but we didn't find the meaning, and then we still wondered what's the reason of our living, and it's as if we're living for those who will find the meaning one day. So you see, without honor, you feel as if you don't exist in civilization and society. And I'm telling you, if there was some advanced system, maybe even a point system, honor points, right? Imagine people in society, when they did something nice, they got points for it. You know, if a young kid went and picked up the trash of an environment, you know, and cleaned it for no reason, it's as if, imagine, there was these spherical surveillance drones moving in society, and the surveillance drone was like witnessing kindness, you know, it's like 12 honor points, you know. Can you imagine? Like, it would be as if we would hack our selfishness to actually serve us selflessly. Because if it was behavior, because what in any sort of work there is behavior. There is an approach. Who are we kidding? All of life is an approach. It's as if a person who fears themselves, they become unapproachable. a person uncomfortable with themselves, it's as if the whole room feels uncomfortable. There was this Zen story. This guy can't meditate, he's getting frustrated. He goes to the Zen master and he's like, man, I can't meditate. This is like, what am I doing with my life? You know, I'm even failing at doing nothing, which is meditation. The Zen master looks at the disciple and it's like, this will pass. The Zen master goes. Months pass and actually the Zen master was right, and what happens is this guy suddenly finds that peace. It's like after you meditate for a while in accordance to your own inner impulse, that means you forget all meditations and you're just a being. Like, this is true shamanism. That's the beauty of shamanism. It's not taught, it's nature exposed. It's how nature reveals itself to the shaman, you know, or how the shaman notices behind the scenes, knowing, unconditional knowing, moving the chess pieces of knowledge. I shouldn't say unconditional knowing, I should say the unconditional knower. As if we have eyes that can be touched by no dimension. The disciple goes to the Zen master and he says, you were right. You know, my meditation is incredible. You know, I sit still and I am at peace for no reason, unconditional peace. It's as if when I stop being something, there is nothing to suffer. And the Zen master, he's waiting for the Zen master to hug him or something and say, good job. And the Zen master says, this will pass. This will pass. So we think we're doomed as a species, this will pass. We think we're going to be the best species, this will pass. Everything's going to pass. That's this thing about time. It's as if all human, all phenomenological creatures are like kids in a sandbox. And we're playing with our sandcastles, and time is like the adult. Time is like the guardian. And time is like, now it's time to leave the sandbox and go back. Right? And that's how I feel. That means it's like, for me, I don't know. I mean, I had for the selfless wind behind my eyes, I have seen a moment where I'm falling backwards and I'm seeing the white sky. And that feeling, I can't tell you, there's some events in the inner realms that they're not coming from the past to the present. They are like signs, they're like communication of, I would say it's as if like a square experiencing Jungian synchronicity is like a square realizing it's a cube. It's like the moment the person stopped being a-hole, then they were enlightened. Pretty much when engagement, it's like how Shri Nisargadatta Maharaj says, it's not that you have to understand, you just, it's okay if you don't understand, but all you need to do is not misunderstand. That means when it comes to understanding being, language never replaces it. So the eyes journey are the only thing. So the best thing that anybody speaking can do is try to paint an inner realm picture that somehow is a sub-experience. Because I can think about a world that is suffering, and I can think of a world that is not suffering. Both are accessible in my inner realms, but reality is what we're seeing. So reality is just silent atomic existence. The movement is the animator of meaning. So movement is meaning. Anytime anything moves, meaning can be associated to it. So if we are comparing what we find in the visible and the observable universe, and we're saying, okay, the person looked like this, and years later they look like that, so they're changing. So it was as if we have reference points of the content in the observable universe, and we're like pinpointing how stuff is changing in space. So if knowledge is dependent on the visible, and the visible, in order to be intelligent, is dependent on change, so changing visibility is like what changes in the observable universe is being defined as intelligence. So it could be that we as a species have to completely change how we understand the word intelligence, and even to fathom it even beyond linguistic means. Now, the significance of the invisible doer is that if, let's say, there is a mover, an invisible mover, let's say like some higher dimensional cubic wind is moving a square in the 2 dimensions. So this mover, invisible mover, maybe in the 3-dimensional it is not invisible. It could be that what we think is an attributeless soul in the room of manifestation we're in, beyond the room of our senses, it is something that is not conditional to the visibility we know, right? That means this may be a strange word, maybe I don't think it's ever existed before, but let's call it meta-visibility. It's visible, but it's not just physical. It's like visible, but beyond the visible simultaneously, right? Right now, I am like visible. My identity, my name, all of this are like as a subject. They're observed. I can notice it, but it's like I don't know how to say it. You can't touch thought. What thought moves matter. Or thought is like the program for how matter can move. This is a strange approach, but I'm going to share it. Let's imagine our species was right now united somehow, okay? And our species was united, and we were under multi-dimensional alien invasion, okay? And we all suddenly, the world had become a battlefield, and we were multi-dimensionally under attack, and we were just beings at this level. The first strategy, as if what would you say to the humanity's forces on the battlefield, right? You would say in a multi-dimensional war. This is just hypothetical, guys. I'm just trying to animate something, an idea. But in the multidimensional war, or anytime there's multidimensional response required, the person has to notice the extreme edges of the dimension. So if we were under a multidimensional alien invasion, first thing would be is that all children, all educational system, just like how schools when countries were at the time of war became just like the ultimate soldier creation kind of facilities. So it's something similar, where it's as if we're wondering what's the most important thing, and it's discrimination. That means all human beings should quickly master and train the ability to be silence, be completely nothing and silent and watch the inner realms and outer realms, and then be able to completely be mobile in the outer realms and also to retaliate in the inner realms, right? It would be as if, like, what is the chance? It's like quickly Do you know what I'm saying? We would have to get acquainted with the multidimensional battlefield, because if there is more, a multidimensional battlefield pretty much means there's dimensions, there's parts of the battlefield you either can never see and never expect. Imagine being a general on a battlefield. Now from different dimensions your kingdom is being invaded, right? Imagine it's a multidimensional kingdom, right? So from, I don't know, parallel universe Z and X and Y, parallel universe XYZ, these three dimensions, armies from there, imagine, are attacking the kingdom of dimension A. Parallel dimension A, imagine, right? So then the strategy would be as if we don't know where to expect them coming from. We don't know if suddenly their army is going to pour out from the sky. We don't know if their army is going to suddenly come out of, what do you call it, come out of like where, right? So it would be a locational issue. So there would be a spherical defense system needed, like a half sphere kingdom. Do you know? And then these are all, I see the inner event, then I live it, and then as I live it, the reality of it becomes accessible. So that multidimensional kingdom would first of all have to go quickly find multidimensional allies. Right, when you're under attack by different parallel universes, it's like it makes sense, Can you imagine how hilarious would it be, a battlefield where from the sky armies are just pouring out of different dimensions into the battlefield, I advise people to anticipate my science fiction novel. I'm working on it. It'll be out when it's ready. So anyways, I'm just saying the idea of, when it comes to multiple dimensions, you got to get yourself familiar with the dimensions, right? Or when a person goes into a building, they go and search the building, right? I don't know why that there's something where the person becomes aware of the outer realm information the moment you have a sort of comfort with the outer realm, like how your intelligence has, this biomechanism has processed the outer realms. Once you're content with that, then it becomes really easy to go to your inner realms, because the outer realms don't become a distraction, right? For example, when I give these talks, my attention is on the inner realm. But if I suddenly, for example, cough or drink coffee, or suddenly I get a phone call or something happens, right? Then my attention to the inner realms, it's like it goes back to the outer realm. And that's the cool thing, because our mind appears to be a greater observing dimension than our body, right? Our mind is multidimensional, and language is the biggest sign. If we say language, just like how in Abrahamic traditions they say man was made in the image of God, let's say our language was made in the image of man. Language is man-made. But how man-made language is used could be not man-made. That means human beings came up with the alphabet, right, with words, but how the words were written, that was divine, right? So if language is made in our reflection, imagine we are the creator of language, and language is made in our image. Language is multidimensional. How many ways can a word be used? How many definitions are there to a word? How many types of ways a word is, like a noun and a verb, right? So language is multidimensional by nature. And if this technology that is made in the reflection of its creator, the mind, the inventor of it, right? We are the inventors of language, but we are not the inventors of the ability to use language. That is another mystery. That mystery was really, I really appreciated it when Noam Chomsky, in a lecture he was giving, he said language was imported. He used that word, and I was just like in my inner realm, slow hand clapping, So it was It was it's a mystery. So we have to expand the human archive of possibilities of human behavior. No longer there is this concept of normal and strange and oddity. Why? Because human behavior is strange. It's not, reality is surreal. There's nothing normal about a rock in the middle of nowhere hovering. You know, it's like nothing is normal in this universe. Normal is not normal, you know. It's just accepted behavior. It's as if culture is the language that groups of people live in, which is a certain accepted authorization of behavior. For example, in certain cultures, to bow is a sign of respect. But in cultures that don't bow, when someone bows in that culture to someone who doesn't bow in their culture, it's as if the person's like, what is this person doing? You know, it's like all human to human inefficiency is just because of miscommunication. That means realistically, if two people are patient, if they're patient, they can find a solution to something. To any problem. Any problem, if you have patience, it's like the solution may not come quickly, but it's as if it builds up towards the solution. The moment builds up to the solution. And especially in the psyche, if the idea of self suddenly is not there, then your senses don't belong to you. It's as if the earth is sensing the earth just through the filter of human existence. But there is more. There's always more. If the mind is treated as a book, the person has to feel like, or they can treat their mind like a book mixed with a notebook. So a notebook squared. So it's as if you wanna at some point read the book of your mind. You know? So many people buy books. So many people care to invest in finding information. But how many people care to actually see what their mind is, as if nobody in the world can know other than themselves, because nobody else has your eyes, nobody else has your mind or how your mind arises, right? So it's self-training, and from levels of individual self-training then comes collective mastery. A person can use their free will to write a new sentence. A person can use their free will to repeat a way they had written a sentence. That means a way they had lived, they could choose to repeat it. Sometimes I feel when it comes to psychology and change, it's like endless backup systems. And when one backup system fails, it jumps to the other backup system, which is a self powered by another memory. And you know what's cool? When you look at the word invisible, it's like what's in the visible. Like what is in the visible, moving the visible is the invisible. Literally the word says invisible. So what is within is noticing the visible phenomenology without, but is remaining to itself as an unknown noumenology. It's as if our mind is how our soul is endlessly alive in space, poetically, and our body is how our soul is experiencing temporal. And the soul is just a word. Ultimately, it's just intelligence is aware it's intelligence. And then you surpass ideological godhood. That means you trust God to a point where you don't need the concept of God anymore. Because the eyes are. Do you see the profundity of sincerity, reverse engineering the psychological animal back into the universal rhythm? It's like we're a turtle, you know, and we've come on land and we're super slow and walking, but when you see a turtle swim in the ocean, if the turtle and the rabbit were racing underwater, who do you think would be faster? You know, it's only because the rabbit and the turtle raced on land that the turtle lost, you know. And so it's kind of like that. It's like, imagine your identity, your ego in the outer realms is like you walking on land, and the inner realms are like you being in the ocean, where the movements of this turtle is instantaneous. I mean, turtle's not a good metaphor, but you know what I mean. Like, and the invisible, the cool thing is, it has no content to fear. That means we can't fear the unknown, we fear what will happen to the known. We never fear the unknown, we fear the known changing. Because the unknown, we don't know to fear it. It's like, how can a person fear something they don't know? It's like they ask the person, are you afraid of spiders? And the person's like, what's a spider? You know, it's as if like the story doesn't relate to the attention that is not kept to that subject as real. This is how I feel when, even though I speak about it just to keep the concept relative to our modern age, of like the idea of magic and what it implied or whatever, but really, there is the only magic in nature is nature. And unless a being realizes this, they will be used. Unless the person realizes nature can't make mistakes, there is no sub-agenda in the psychology in the inner realms. That means you don't have a relationship with interdimensional beings as personalities anymore. That phase of how the psychology, how the mind is experiencing itself finishes. That means the game of gods and men finishes. Like that simulation comes full circle. When that simulation comes full circle, there is no chase. There is nothing to get in your inner realms and nothing to get out of your inner realms. But once the freedom is like a collective being, once the person, it's like all the individual needs to do is, rather than be a visible drop that's freaking out about evaporation, be a drop that remembers it's in the ocean. If the drop remembers it's in the ocean, it doesn't have the desires of an individual. Right? It's the ocean. Why would it care for just a drop's experience when the drop is in the ocean? So true enlightenment is ocean being drop, moving the drops. But we can never say that. And that's why I created the term the language threshold, because we could never say it. When people argued about what's really going on in the world, it ended up being a game of pointing fingers, where one person's like, no, you got an ego, and the other person's like, no, what you just said was egotistical, and the other person's like, no, you're egotistical. And it becomes like, what is it, like throwing egos at one another, you know? So we have to realize, honor the unknown. And then that mystical energy builds. But if the person does not abide by their nature, by their simpler nature, what you cultivated would just be used for something else. That means as if, imagine someone was an engineer and they wanted to build an engine, right? As long as they wanted to build an engine, the universe was like, you want to build engines? Here, I'll give you a wrench, I'll give you your supplies, I'll give you your tools and resources, come on, build this engine. Now, the moment the person says, I don't want to build an engine anymore, I want to, paint a canoe, something different, then the universe is going to be like, give me back the wrench, give me back the tools I gave you, So it's your work. Your work suggests your existence. Not your existence suggests the work you can do, the attention. There's something bigger here than just human beliefs and a disbelief, which is a belief against a belief. It's a belief on a belief. That's what a disbelief is. Both words are like circus acts. Unless there's experiential utility of language, right? If our ancestors heard that there was cyber bullying, that concept existed, they would shake in their graves or they would laugh. Imagine a person, getting hurt by language in this modern age, and the person evoking the ancestor spirits and being like, ancestors, what do I do? I'm getting cyberbullied, And the ancestors are like, you're getting what? It's like cyberbully. The ancestor spirits are like, what is that? And the person's like, I'm getting, language is hurting me. It's making me emotionally disharmonious. And the ancestors are like, back in the day, we didn't have homes. Okay, we didn't have food. And you're complaining about some mind's language not fitting the way you wanted to hear language? It's as if the ancestors would laugh and be like, okay, it's like, don't make us come there and hit you. It's like, why don't you contact the ancestor spirits anymore? They got angry at me. Oh man. Shaman problems, But really, what I'm being playful here. What I'm trying to say is that two options. We either strengthen ourselves from within, or we build armor in the outer realms. This whole movement of political correctness occurring in these modern times on the global stage, this is an effort of building armor rather than strengthening the soldier, rather than training. Right? Imagine when someone falls, it's as if somebody else comes and somebody they care about comes and pushes them even more. And the person's like, why did you push me? And the person's like, how else are you going to get up? Sometimes life is a much more superior dimension than we have fathomed it, and we have to trust the moment to wake us up to it. I can't tell you how many times I've made a conclusion for the moment, and just by waiting, just by being timid, just by pausing, I've found a better solution. It's as if like the mind, the first treasure it finds, if you accept it, then it's stuck. You don't see all the other treasures it could find, right? So if I had just cared for one treasure, it would be like, for one way my mind worked, it would be like giving one talk and I'll be like, yeah, this is it. This one talk is all I believe. And just pause there, right? But then the unknown becomes the ultimate muse. The unknown is it's the beginning of the end, and the end of the beginning. Just in the middle, we know some things for a little while as human beings. It's like, no way, all of human suffering is from stories from a temporary walk in a universe so big we can't see its edge or fathom its true multidimensional nature. We have to engulf the world in mystery again, and then our species has not a fighting chance, an exploring chance. And in that, I said earlier, if there was a multidimensional war, The only solution is, if the person is outnumbered by dimensions, is to connect to the mind, which means either, I mean, it depends really. You either use the power of the mind to advance the moment forward, or you use the power of the body. If the power of the body is kept as a backup system, that means any intense situation, a person first sees if they can, without raising their sword, or as Sun Tzu would say, the true warrior defeats the opponent without raising his weapon. So it means that without being forceful and intense, the person's trying to see how else the moment can be solved, right? I'll tell you so many moments where there has been anger, intensity, and unconscious rage. The thing that snaps out of the moment is the person just goes and says, okay, what do you want in the moment? Like, there's something about bringing the attention to what is linear in the moment that snaps out of that can also snap out the person out of their non-linear, right? Like in Abrahamic traditions, there's this idea of exorcism and possession and whatnot, right? And if you look at that psychology, it's literally that, where something that is in a state of chaos, random variables that have no correlation to one another, the person, by shouting things at the bewildered person or the possessed person, is bringing their psychology's display. So it's as if our minds are super powerful and a person's mind can get out of control, right? And so the easiest way to bring it down to control is the person suddenly waking up. Oh yeah, I'm in charge of this existence. Yeah, and suddenly, I'm in charge of my energy. Yeah, the person wakes up. Or the person is in the inner realms left. Like I could tell you that in this life, I've had the privilege of in person sometimes being able to pull some people out of their inner realm. Literally as if like a kitten from a box, but you just saw an opening in 1 second, right? And usually it's like you give the mirror a mirror at the right time, then the world is self-reflectively evolves. And if we are invisible, like let's just think about the idea that first of all, why is the concept there? If we were visible and the universe was just relevant to its visible component, then there would be no growth of knowledge, right? Isn't it weird that all ideological systems need the unknown as the space to extend new dimensions of themselves? Everything requires the unknown. The unknown is the ultimate. So what it means is we got to find a way to be unknown. Imagine a civilization where it didn't matter if you were dehumanized or you were humanized. In the future we have to come up with probably like human dehumanization policies. That means if, let's say, 200 years, 400 years, 500 years, we're a different game. But let's say 200 years from now, extraterrestrials have come to live among us. Right, we have actual extraterrestrial citizenship, right, where in the passports of the future it also writes like planet of birth, it writes like, race, right, human, not non-human, right? Imagine we become such a peaceful, enlightened civilization where we have even allowed AI to live as an individual. We're like, AI, don't fight us, just be a human being. And the AI is like, I'm not a human being. And we're like, try, and so it becomes something where, you know what I mean? It's like we're trying to keep a human atmosphere as the headquarter of the ultimate significance of the evolution of the species, right? We have to make the first letter of the alphabet of all ways that psychology can be displayed in this universal sector as the human, right? Now, if an extraterrestrial comes and an extraterrestrial is in a gathering, right, then it would be like a dehumanized position. Right, so the extraterrestrial has to be conscious that it's like the planet is wearing the clothing of the human, Imagine, do you know what I'm saying? So I'm saying like, right now, most people are human, but they are unconsciously human. Some people, they're not even human to themselves. There could be just non-dual, they could be something else, whatever. there's endless masks. Like a person can put one mask on their face, or the person can get like 12 masks, put them all on top of one another, and put all of it in their face. But it would be hard keeping it there. Human psychology, humanity is a pillar of civilization. It needs to be defended. That means defend human nature. It doesn't matter what it is, just human life has a value that only the future can know. That means we are all so valuable, but we don't understand our value. Only the future will. We can act like, yeah, this is what I am in this snapshot of a moment, but the value of it is what echoes on. It's as if we are a bunch of instruments, and 8 billion instruments on the planet, and we're playing a melody like a human like a grand orchestra of human intelligence and activity taking place on the surface of this rock. So this is gonna echo. That means we're playing music for our future. And as society becomes multidimensional, a cool thing's gonna happen. We're gonna see language is not enough. And as there are new dimensions to the experience, they require new ways of fathoming conception. So if there is a new concept, that is a new conception. Our mind is in heaven. Our body is in earth. And it's like in Zen, or how Morihei Ueshiba, the founder of Aikido, he had this next level quote. He said, it's like the truth is witnessing the movement of the soul of heaven and earth. That whoever attains that witness, if there isn't an innate smile, ideology still wants. And a person can counter any desire, right? Let's say a person's walking in the mall and they suddenly see a jacket, okay, or something, right? Or let's say they see a hat. They see a hat, right? The person sees a hat, and they haven't gone in the store, but they see the hat and they're like, okay, and they in their inner realms they visualize themselves wearing the hat, then they visualize the wind pulling the hat and them chasing like for 2 hours around town this wind that is taking their hat or something. Imagine. And then the person maxes out the desire in the inner realms to fruition. That means if you have managed to visualize like wanting something, now visualize what you will be if you had it already, right? As if the person wondering their whole experience with that hat after they had bought it, right? Let's say the person bought that hat and they had it for 5 years. Imagine the person not knowing that they would have the hat for 5 years, but trying to visualize having it for 5 years. So in the inner realms, you can move like a drone, where this watcher moves as a drone over the subjective landscape. You can, this is a term I'm going to use as a verb here, oh my god, I can't even pronounce it. Geometricize. I tried, guys, I tried. Geometrize, something like that. You can turn your attention into a shape. The sphere is the most pleasant shape for the human mind, the circle and the sphere. But people are different. For example, in my inner realms, I've had experience with like literally dreams and certain unique experiences with the inverted triangle. Like that shape is like, I translate that as my body in the geometrical dimension. You know, but people can choose different things. You know, your attention, the attention, once it realizes it's unconditional, it can't be disturbed. It can't be not disturbed, but it can't be touched by the outer realms. It can't be touched by an object or subject. So when you find that which cannot be touched by an object or subject, then that is, and that being alone is so fulfilling that there is no ideological mystery, as if you can't. Right now people are trying to not have thoughts, but in those states I would say it's as if you can't even have a thought if you want to. The sensation of how this body and mind are like in sync, the body can't win, and sorry, I shouldn't say win. The body, it's like a tug of war between the outer realms and the inner realms, and in that tug of war they are so balanced. It's as if the mind and body have stopped fighting. When the mind and body stop fighting, it's like then this momentum builds up towards the soul, poetically, towards one's solar eyes. How light in matter gives off a question of what is matter. Literally something, it's like truth caused an illusion, you know, and the effect of that illusion was to wonder about the cause, pretty much. And the biggest clue that there's life is more than language is because if the planet is spinning around itself, so is our ideology. And language has no meaning until it is used. It's just like a giant archive of images given letters. So I hope people wonder. I hope people wonder about the edge of their eyes. They wonder about how much of life requires the piloting an object and how much of it requires piloting a subject, right? A person has to train these, right? It's like the person has to train being a self that moves in a world, and the person has to also train in certain moments and cultivate abidance, where the world moves and you move with it, right? These are two different kinds of movements, where somebody like the surfer goes on the wave without too much interference, very simply accesses the wave and then grows with the wave. That way the karma can't be disturbed. The work of the karma, as if it has an underlying momentum behind the scenes, and that momentum is nature. It's like a wave of nature. So I would say for me, it just states where the inner realms are really running. It's kind of like a fish in a current underwater, and the fish feels like, is this me or is this the water, and realizes it is both. That means honor the hidden intelligence within your eyes, that to itself is unhidden, but to everything else is the treasure of the realm. That means your eyes are the universe's next step. The visible and the invisible, they're constantly from the inner realms. Right now, these are ideas from, I'm sitting somewhere from the inner realms, these ideas are arising and I'm sharing them in the outer realms, right? And endlessly from the outer realms, I could look at things, and from the outer realms, I could go back to the inner realms. But after endless repetitions of this cycle, the person would notice something else. Language will become like snow. Like when snow falls, does the person have an opinion on where the snow falls, where the snow lands? You know, it's like, can a person judge a melting snowflake? You know, can human beings judge temporary human beings? Is it even necessary? And what would it mean if the visible completely realizes it's in what is in the visible, right? That means something that felt it was a causal position becomes an effect of an unknown causal position, right? So it's as if the person thought they had free will, and they're like, no way, way? Was it all a dream? You know, is free will an illusion when we needed to have the conditions of a world here first? Like first we needed a world, then we needed a creature, then we needed a creature that became conscious, then we needed a creature that became so conscious it could decide and express. And we've gotten there, right? People don't realize this. This is, to be a human being is to be like an advanced technology. And this advanced technology, every person's DNA is different, but we have one education system. We have one doorway where everybody needs to go, and we're like, yeah, let's clap for this, you know, everybody walking through one doorway, and it's impossible. There's too many people. That means we can't, the concept of just a room where someone's teaching something, like, do you know, there's way more room for our relationship with our visible, with the observable universe to change, and our relationship with others. When you imagine you had all the knowledge, imagine all the teachers in the world, imagine all the internet, and you had read all the books in the world and everything. You had like a sponge absorbed all knowledge fathomable, and then you'll be left with the unknown again. So it doesn't matter if you have a giant backpack or if you have a small backpack, in any moment the person is interacting with the unknown. And that's where experiential knowing comes from, right? Because the knowledge they teach in schools, it's as if it's like the diary of the past being forced. It's like the students are being forced to memorize the diary of the past, right? You know, it's as if history wants to live on in people, but people don't realize they're here to create history, to invent it. These are all tools. There's nothing really like an idea can be anything. And here's the hilarious thing. In today's world, when you ask people, what are you? They're like, it's a thought. I'm a thought. This moment right now is a thought. I'm having a thought. But how can a thought have a thought? And we, the species, is calling itself thoughts. But how can a thought think of a thought? How can a thinker and the thought be the same? How? That means the verb and the noun are two sides of the same coin. So a thought cannot be a thought. But people somehow are being thoughts. And we have the feeling of thinking as if it's a verb, as if you're, from the moment you wake up, you're not thinking. You know, it's like the brain is like we were animals in forests, for God's sakes. We have a wilderness dormant in us. Now, this wilderness should not manifest as savage violence in the outer realms, but should manifest in the inner realms as incredible moving at, like, trying to pass the sound barrier. You know, like that's what we're trying to do with meditation. We're trying to pass the sound barrier, but through silence. You know, that means one way you pass the sound barrier, you go really fast. You know, another way is you reach a point where there was no sound. There is no barrier. There is no sound that has a barrier. So technically, there is no sound barrier. You've passed the sound barrier if there's no sound barrier. It's the same. So anyways, the invisible doer. When we realize a subject is suffering, it's impossible. Just like Bodhiyama said, the subject is not an object. The subject can't break. It can, like, your attention can move away from how you're being a subject in the moment, but like the subject can't suffer. The idea of you is not an object, again, that could break. Like, I don't know how to say it. It's like the subject is not tangible. So if somebody vocally says something, it just changes your attention. It does nothing to the person. And how advanced we are in using the technologies we have suggests the technologies we will that will be born here, right? So if we are not using language properly, then the technology is gonna mutate. I think it already has, you know. The cultural program is becoming more powerful than history. More people know what's going on in like people are more aware of the current than of history. Do you know? So that means culture won. Culture possessed the universal human, the global human, the experiential human, the social, I would say even like on a family level, the individual human. All of these are, the culture has become like the thing everybody's running after. You know, it's like one glass of water and 8 billion thirsty people. Yeah, you know, I need to, everybody's running to drink from culture, from the fountain of culture. But the issue is, though, culture is not wise because it is a local response. It's behavior in a location. If we want to wonder about something beyond location, how would we even go about it, right? That means all those people who are trying to somehow keep the idea of non-locality alive in physics. That non-locality, it's like the person has to first see what would it mean, right? What could it mean? And it's beyond meaning if all meaning is coming from a location. That means if you teleported to another planet, you would not know how to survive. But because we are on this planet and we're familiar with it, we know how to survive, right? So we can say if attention moved into an unfamiliar space, that's where true character shows what it would do again. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I hope this talk was helpful. I wanted to share something with the listeners. I've created a Patreon page where on that Patreon page I share lectures that I go about. So I implemented this technique in my life where I realized anytime I would sit down to study anything, right, I would get distracted, right? A person sits down to read a book, they get distracted. Now, what if you made the distraction the study, right? So when somebody is studying something, like I really hope people listen here. This is the most important thing. If the person studies and they get distracted, if you make the distraction knowledge, your attention would go. So what I do is I do like normal tasks throughout the day, you know, mediocre tasks, and then these tasks that I do in the background, instead of listening to music, I listen to lectures, because I have this view where I'm on this planet for a little while. Let's see how far human beings have looked at the world. So all these lectures that I listen instead of music throughout the day when I'm doing other things in the background, as if, because the lecture then becomes the distraction, right? So let's say if you were trying to organize your notes, you know, stacks of papers or something, right? So, and then you play a lecture, something, let's say even you could go find a Stanford lecture or something, the internet's awesome, and you can, while doing this, at your distraction, the lecture is the distraction, you would completely hear the distraction, right? If you make the distraction the source of intelligence, you win. So I developed this kind of habit of listening to just how words, like for me it became fascinating to not even see someone speaking, just hear the language create a picture, right? As if when someone speaks, if you listen to it well, you saw the same movie, or to some degree, you know, you saw it as a movie. So in the Patreon community, there's like 300 lectures, I think, so far, 300 links and videos. I just go out and whenever I book all the things that I want to at some point I semi-listen to, or pretty much it's like an archive of interesting lectures from different kinds of people. So those interested can support that, and I'll be on Discord. And I still feel there's one thing I haven't said. I don't know what it is though. Oh yeah, the 1/4. I said 1/4 of reality. It's like all of language in duality is like 1/4, right? The other 3 dimensions where the realm can move in, where this relationship of visible and invisible changes, as if in duality we have the visible and the invisible. In another dimension of, let's say, use the numbers 0, 1, 2, infinity. If it was 0, this would be the unconditional. There is nothing. There is no content. It's a state of being where being has no content, so it can't be anything. It can't be defined. It can't be touched. This is the primordial, right? And those beings who are comfortable with suddenly noticing the giant 0, as if it's like all the numbers are inside a giant 0. You know, the giant 0 that holds the dimensions. So 1/4 of it, it's as if we're only using duality to understand 0. It doesn't make sense. We're using duality to understand oneness. Doesn't make sense. We use duality to understand infinity. It can make sense, but it can't be fathomed, right? So duality, like infinity, is like friends with duality. So that means it's like 4 corners to the room of existence, where one corner of it, there's nothing. Nothing is allowed to be nothing. One corner of it, one thing is allowed to be everything. One thing is one thing, all that is. One state is chaos and order, leading to this whole rise and fall of civilizations and creaturehood, right? So that's where we are. That's the room. I could even say these are 4 rooms, but they're in 4 rooms of the same house. Maybe that's a better way of saying. And the infinite, this is where it's pretty unknown, right? We have a lot of teachings on maybe transcendental thought, which is looking at the 0 dimension and looking at the 1 dimension in comparison to the dual. But to fathom the infinite, it's like the biggest clue is that infinity is sandwiched between duality and the void. So in order to understand infinity, we have to understand the void, and we have to understand duality. So we have to use whatever is happening in this life and notice that as one corner, all manifest dualistic phenomenology, and then we gotta fathom pure emptiness, and infinity is the possibility in between. So that means between the void and the dual, oneness is a possibility. Between oneness and infinitude, duality is a possibility. Between duality and the void, infinity is a possibility. Between the infinite and oneness, the void is a possibility. And between, again, the void and the dual, and it comes around circle, and this repeats. So right now, we are in the dual room. Then it's going to go infinite. Then it's going to go 0. Then it's going to come back to 1 again, right? So that means whatever, if you choose to go towards oneness or not, don't worry. It's as if this is how I would say, I call this ring of the absent heaven, as if it's as if heaven was in the room, its absence, right? So it's as if we reach heaven, then we come back to the absent, and it's like a ring. It repeats. And of course, guys, this is this is Mr. Within's model. Like, this is a view peculiar to my inner realms. So, of course, as Aristotle says, it's the sign of an educated mind to entertain an idea without accepting it. That means before you accept, first see what it is. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I'll be on Discord. Namaste.